What is ambition? Depending on who you talk to, ambition can either be seen as the thing that keeps you pushing forward to complete something really challenging, or it can be seen as a negative trait in which it is presumed that ambitious people would do anything they can to succeed and they will step on others to get ahead. There is also such thing as lack of ambition, and more confusingly, over-ambition. Over-ambition? How much ambition is too much? I confess, I have no idea if ambition is inherently good or bad. I am only talking about it because I realise I have been using it in previous episodes as a synonym for overestimating my abilities. The Cambridge definition of ambition is a strong wish to achieve something. The question is, what was I trying to achieve in the realm of Black Mesa mapping? By mid-2018, I had only finished and released one Black Mesa map that was, well, let's just say I learned a lot from the public's response. I had also finished a large map pack that I was waiting to release once a bug with Black Mesa was fixed. Technically, I had achieved something with both these projects. What next? Where could my ambition take me? In this episode, I am going to talk about two very distinct Black Mesa projects that I worked on in 2018 and 2019. Both are very different from each other. One of the projects was a super complex idea and the other was very simple, yet both of them had something in common that doomed them to never release. This is my Black Mesa mapping journey. The start of 2018 was one of my most productive periods of time for creating maps. I finished Black Mesa Flatline in the first few months, and at the start of April I made a Half-Life 2 Episode 2 level called Misnomer with the Cat of War as part of a RunThinkShootLive.com mapping challenge. Then, at the end of April 2018, Nostalgiaville started and I began making Cosmonaut, for which the deadline was the 24th of June 2018. After I had created my winning entry, I sent it in and spent the rest of June resting. This is where today's story begins. At the very beginning of July 2018, I decided to undertake a new Black Mesa project, as by this point the normal thing to do was to come back to Black Mesa every so often. You would have thought Insanity and Vengeance at Dusk would have taught me that unconventional Black Mesa maps are hard to pull off and are not well received, but I didn't want to make just another Flatline. This wasn't going to be a traditional map where you play as Gordon Freeman in the Black Mesa Research Facility and go from beginning to end in a conventional manner. No, I was an innovator whose sole purpose was to find new and fun ways of playing custom maps. Or so I thought. I woke up one morning in July with a crazy idea for a custom game mode that would completely change Black Mesa as we know it. Well, the mode was actually based on an idea that Planet Phillip shared on Twitter, where he said he wanted to see a map where the player must rescue Half-Life 2 citizens who were stuck, suspended over a pit. If the player did not reach them on time, the citizens would fall into the pit and perish. I can't quite remember what else he suggested, as this was over 5 years before recording this video, but I liked the general principle of the idea. It was a simple premise, but I wanted to take it a step further. I would have scientists suspended over a pit of toxic slime and a time limit showing on screen, but the main difference would be my map would be randomly generated. I already knew this idea was a massive undertaking, but I knew I could use the game text entity to display the time on screen, so the only real thing to worry about was randomly generating the levels. Generating brushes and environments would be near impossible, so instead, I made the decision to build a set layout but randomly generate the path through it, as well as the enemies, weapons, and pickups. I will now try my best to explain the full plan I devised for the map and the random generation feature. The player would spawn in at the same place each time, but there would be 3 different doors, each leading to different areas. The map would randomly open 2 doors and keep 1 door shut each time the map was played, so the player had a choice, but it would ideally be a different choice each time. The player would pick a door and move through that area quickly, as they only had a limited amount of time. Each of these 3 routes would eventually lead to the same place, the central room where the scientists were suspended over the glowing green waste, but the player could not get to the control panel to rescue them just yet, because in the central room there would be 3 more doors leading to different routes. Again, each route would inevitably lead to the same place, and 2 doors would be chosen to be accessible each time the map was played. After going through one of the 3 new areas, the player would then be at the control panel to be able to rescue the scientists, or watch them plummet to their deaths. I planned for the different routes to each be of a different environmental theme based on a chapter of Black Mesa, for instance, questionable ethics, we've got hostiles, apprehension, power-up, and so on. Each would have different enemies and 1 main separate puzzle or challenge. Having 6 random areas would mean there would not be a whole lot of variety, but if a player played the map enough, they could learn the best path to take, while still having to make a choice based on the random elements. The weapons, ammo, and the spawns of the enemies would also be based on randomness, but not complete randomness. For instance, I, as the mapper, would place 3 HECU spawn points in an area, and the map would randomly select one of them during each time the map was played. This would be the case for all the items and NPCs. I made a start on the timer that was shown on screen using the game text entity in Hammer. At this stage, I also created a cage for the scientists to be held captive and got it moving along a rail. Ah, that's where that obsession came from. Actually, now that I think about it, I'm noticing a worrying theme of scientists being taken hostage in my levels. Honestly, it's nothing. Anyway, I was now ready to start building the main level. I made the decision to cut one of the areas out of the plan, as I was worried about hitting entity limits in Hammer. There was a lot of logic to implement. This meant there would only be 2 different routes to take when the player reached the main toxic waste room for the first time. I created an outline for the map with the doors that would lead to the different areas. I made sure the main mechanic of saving the scientists was working, as well as what would happen if you failed.
Such a poor outcome.
I imagined a player running up to the final console just to see the scientists plummeting to their horrible deaths. So all was well and good. I had the main parts of the level blocked out. The main mechanics had been implemented. All I had to do now was create 5 unique routes, detail the levels, add all the entities, add the random elements for each and every one of them, test the level. Honestly, this just seemed like too big a task. Especially since I had no idea if Black Mesa or Hammer was even capable of supporting a level this size with this many entities. Imagine trying to optimize it. It's like having 5 or 6 different maps, but in one. This is the part of a project where the novelty and excitement of the idea wears off, and you're left with the reality that you have so much left to do, and that you will spend weeks or even months on it. Another thing that tends to happen around this stage of a project is that I get ideas for new projects that I would rather be doing instead of the current project. If you have made or even attempted to create maps before, you will understand what I am talking about. Nostalgiaville was released on the 15th of July, and Cosmonaut seemed to be getting quite a good response. I did that thing I talked about in the last episode with Black Mesa Flatline and thought, I already have 3 maps, maybe I should add 1 more and release it as a standalone mod. And that cycle started again. Because it was in Half-Life 2, I won't talk about it much here, but it was the main reason I stopped making that Black Mesa project with random generation and captive scientists. So what can be learned from the 2-week stint of making that over-the-top project? Not much. I guess it was fun to plan, and I was excited for the idea, but I let my ambition spiral out of control during the planning stage, and that doomed the rest of its potential development. Maybe I should have only planned 3 random routes instead of 5 or 6. Or tried to create the map with no randomness. Or maybe a non-timed traditional map where you have to rescue 3 scientists in a cage. I don't know. I got to work making Half-Life 2 Cosmonauts and was therefore unable to make another Black Mesa map until 2019. I know I said I wasn't going to discuss Half-Life 2 Cosmonauts much, but it's important to the next Black Mesa mapping project I worked on. It was March of 2019 and all the levels for it were complete. Cosmonaut was similar to Flatline in that I kept adding unnecessary levels and it kept getting much longer than it should have been. I was at the stage of development where you get the mods playtested, then you fix all the bugs, make all the changes, and then you repeat that cycle, potentially forever. I was bored. I decided that I would take a break from Cosmonauts and undertake my very own mapping challenge, just a personal one. I would set a deadline, pick a theme, and then make one map for Black Mesa. A theme was chosen from one of the previous Half-Life 2 vills hosted on runthinkshootlive.com. I wrote down the themes from the Hammer Cup and the Lambda Cup and then used a random number generator to select one. Bridgeville. Easy. There are plenty of assets available to make a nice big bridge and an interesting level, so I got to work sketching out an idea. I could picture in my head what I wanted it to look like, and I felt that I had a grasp on the mechanics, so I started building. I set the deadline to be the end of March, so I had about 3 weeks from the time I started. The map was set outdoors and contained a bridge that crossed a canyon. The player would start on one side, have to make their way to the surface, and then onto the bridge. There would be a helicopter fight on it, and then when the helicopter was defeated, the player could get across the bridge to the other side and make their way into another building, finishing the map. It has been a while since I had made a completely new map, as all the new Cosmonaut levels were finished 2 or 3 months prior, so creating this map felt like a breath of fresh air. I think my productivity peaked when creating it. It was the most detailed thing I had done up until that point, even more so than a lot of Cosmonaut. It included the same trip mine maze from Flatline and some jumping parts along the side of the canyon. There was a lot of interaction with the map and a number of puzzles and barriers for the player to get around. Nothing revolutionary, but custom maps and mods don't need to invent a new way to play or find an undiscovered level design technique. Unlike the Black Mesa project I talked about before, this one played it safe. The main fault in this map was its literal size. It was huge. It needed to accommodate the helicopter fight on the bridge, so there had to be a lot of space in the canyon so the helicopter could fly over and under the bridge. There were a number of graphical glitches that showed up in certain places that could probably be fixed, but actually, the map ran quite smoothly. Overall, this very well may have been the best map I had created up until that point. I was really happy with the outcome. I even finished it before April came around. The graphical glitches still occurred, but I could always go back and fix them later, closer to release. For the next couple of days, I fixed some bugs in Cosmonaut which were sent in from the first round of testing. After that, I came back and looked at this fine Black Mesa map that I had made. Time to finish it up and upload it to the workshop. But wait. That didn't take too long to create such a good map. In fact, that was easy. Maybe I could create just one more map and add it to the end. I fear I am beginning to sound like a broken record. This is genuinely what happened. I decided to do another personal mapping challenge in April of 2019. I didn't pick a theme as I knew I wanted it to be set in a questionable ethics-like environment, and I had a good idea on what would be included. I am not going to draw this story out any more than it needs to be. I started creating a level that was quite long and contained a lot of stuff. I then made an ending to the map where the player stands on a platform that extends out over a portal, and then they would get teleported to Xen. Bear in mind, the Xen chapters of Black Mesa were not out at this time, so I could not add a level after it, but I thought, Xen will be coming out soon, so I guess I can wait until then and make the final map. The questionable ethics map that I made was a genuinely good map, but it was really broken. There were a lot of graphical glitches and it ran slowly. Actually, it often seemed to run slower than my outdoor canyon map. It started with the player in a lobby, and then once the player got through the main door, there was a large room with balconies around it with the portal at the bottom. Because the map was so big and had so many bugs, I split it into 2 separate levels, the lobby in one and the main balcony area in the other. That actually didn't fix anything, and the graphical glitches still occurred and the maps were still super slow. I then decided to give up on this Black Mesa project and come back to it after I had released Cosmonaut. Cosmonaut released on the 17th of May 2019 and was somewhat of a success. Actually, I think I got off easy as there were so many issues with it. Many of the issues were due to me trying to include a plot or storyline, which was the issue with Flatline. Anyway, after I was really done with Cosmonaut, I didn't go back to the Black Mesa project. I didn't want to keep wrestling with the questionable ethics-like maps, trying to fix and optimize them, and I felt like I had missed my opportunity to release the first bridge map I had made in March. I could have spent a few hours trying to repair it and finish it up, but now I felt like it was part of a bigger map pack project that would have a laboratory map after it, and then a Xen section after that. I put the levels into my unfinished levels folder on my computer, and then went to bed. The thing is, I genuinely think if I hadn't tried to create that second map, the bridge map would be out on the Steam Workshop. I had a strong wish to create a simple map. I set myself a deadline and generated a theme. I spent about 3 weeks working hard on it, and then finished it on time with only a few bugs remaining. That was a success, right? I had achieved what I had set out to do, until I tried to make it part of something bigger. Make it part of something that it had no place in. The bridge project was very different from the first project I talked about. The plan for the random generation project was too complex. There was no deadline for it, and I had no idea if the engine would be able to handle it. The scope was just too large from the very start, and so the entire project was doomed to begin with, which is why I spent 2 weeks on it and barely got anywhere. The second project, however, was very simple in design. I stuck to what was known and what worked in other maps and the Black Mesa campaign. I set a deadline, had a decent theme, and I was able to make the map in 3 weeks. The thing that doomed this map to never release came after it was finished, when I then decided to extend the scope for no reason at all other than the fact that I could. I feel like I could have released it at any point in 2019, but it will forever feel like it is part of this unfinished Black Mesa map pack. Maybe if I hadn't been working on Cosmonaut, then I would have found more success, but even then, I would still have probably waited for the Xen chapters to be added to the game so I could give the map pack a proper finale. I have no idea why I kept doing this. Flatline, Cosmonaut, and now this. Constantly wanting to extend what I have done to make it longer. Was it to show off that I could make a project so big? Was it to gain validation as a mapper to show I was motivated to create such intricate map packs? Was it because I enjoyed the feeling of creating these projects and saw potential in them and what they might become? I don't know. Was it even possible to create one simple Black Mesa map and then release it to the public? Well, yes. It had been done before by other people. The primary example of such a person is Jamaican Dave. Up until this point in 2019, Jamaican Dave had created and released about 7 Black Mesa maps, all of which received many positive comments and much praise. They were usually simple, single maps which didn't try anything crazy. They just contained good level design principles and good use of Black Mesa's and Half-Life's mechanics. If I were to break out of the cycle of extending projects out of scope, I was going to need to take this approach for my next project to ensure I could create something fun, but simple. I was going to need to take the same approach to making maps as Jamaican Dave. I would need help achieving this goal, and I would find help in the most unlikely of people.